So once upon a time I had the Phalaenopsis, and then I stopped taking the tablets, and well, this is what happens. That's where I am now, and this is what I'm trying to film in these May updates. It's quite a task, so let's go. Right, so let's whiz along the mounted Phalaenopsis. Most of these are just no ID hybrids. I mean, this one's actually got a name. This is Zen Min Brontosaurus, lovely blooms, and this has only recently been mounted. It's got no active roots on it. It wasn't doing very well in its pot, so I thought, well, we'll give it a go on a mount and see what happens with that. But its latest leaf is not full size, and I think it's finished growing, so it obviously wasn't doing very well. There's no reason for that, apart from that was produced in the winter. But I often get asked how I water mine. Well, that's easily solved. Sharp intake of breath. Water in the crown, water in the leaf joints. Not in here, not with warm temperatures and fans blowing a gale. That'll be dry in an hour. I wouldn't do that in the evening going into the night though. This one hasn't long been mounted either. Another one just was not growing. I must admit, my experience says that the mini Phalaenopsis are just not vigorous. I don't know why, I don't know what's in their makeup that slows them down, but this one looks like it's about to lose two of its older leaves, and it's only got one new one pushing on now. But again, no active root growth. There's just one tip, which is just restarted from a dormant root basically, but this thing needs to get some branches going or some new roots. Well, it's not doing so good, that one. This one, however, is pushing on nicely now. It's got a nice lot of root tips and nice new leaf coming. The last leaf was bigger than the ones before, so that's what I call progress, and that's what I call a mealybug. I'll get onto that in a minute. Tykes do love getting in there, and that's a new leaf too. If that gets a bite or two in there, that will leave a mark. Anyway, nice active root growths on that one, so I'm okay with that one. That one's not doing so bad. And this little one has got some active roots, some restarting growth after the winter, some new ones coming, and a little spike, and a new leaf, and an old one going. So that's got everything going on all at once on that one. But those new roots should push on nicely and get a grip on that mount now, because that one's still being held on by its ties. It's got one root that attached towards the end of last year, but the older ones aren't. So it needs some new ones to get a hold of that mount, and then it will push on better. That's the minis. And the two larger ones that are mounted. There's this one, and this one, bug damage everywhere on this one. This one got forgotten, it got stuck at the back somewhere, and it just didn't do well. Its oldest leaf is going, that's fine, that is its oldest leaf. But then that one looks like it's starting to fade as well. It has got a new one coming that managed to split. But nonetheless, this one's root system is coming back into active growth now. Some of the older roots are branching, and we have got some new ones starting. So that is, now it's out in what I call the warm and steamy, which is how they would prefer to grow. They'll put up with a lot of nonsense, but they're going to grow best if you can keep them warm and steamy. That's where they would naturally grow. That's that one. And the last one. This one's been probably mounted the longest. Its last leaf, produced in the winter, didn't look so good, but it's having a go at another one straight after. So it's in growth mode at the moment. This has pushed roots out in all places, even around the back. So this hasn't got a bad root system. No sign of any new ones yet, but anyway, it's in active growth, so it's not doing bad. So that's the mounted Phalaenopsis. Now, I did say I'm filming these in what will appear to you as a totally random order, but it's the order I water things in, which should guarantee I don't miss anything out. But it will mean all sorts of different plants will come. Like, you won't get all of one type of plant together necessarily. It'll be the order that they come in. And quite honestly, I think that might break it up a bit. To film all of one type, you know, bearing in mind this will be quite a few parts, this start of season May update thing, you know, it might get a bit boring. So breaking the plant types up might help. So I'm just going to go along this bit now. This is a Bulbophyllum. This is in one of Oliver's homemade basket mounts. And this is Bulbophyllum Sycamensi, which is a range of hills in northern India, I believe. This has never bloomed for me, but it is now pushing out quite a few new growths. Some of the growths on this are large, some that were produced in the winter aren't so big, but there's quite a lot of new growths on this at the moment. There's sort of one there, centre shot. There's another one pushing on down in amongst that sea of green, and there's some new growth starting at the top. One or two of those might be spikes. I don't know the plant well enough to work it out yet. So there may be some blooms on that, but so far this one's never bloomed. And this is an anomaly. This one will not flipping bloom. This is one of my Arangus, and this is Mr. Sidii. And it grows well. I mean, it's got many little plantlets. They're not strictly speaking kikis on Arangus, they are plants. It branches from the base and produces new plants. So it ends up bushy, if you see what I mean. But at the moment, this is pushing on in active growth. There's new leaves coming up all over the place. It's got a good root system. There's a couple of new ones starting up. But so far, it hasn't bloomed. And looking at my book, I do have a book just on Arangus that is very, very detailed on all the species. This isn't a high light one, so you know, and it gets good light where it is there, because basically come the evening time the sun comes in through this bit of glass, so it's getting good light, so it's not, you know, lack of light. Anyway, that's one of the Arangus. Next one along the list, this is this one with a strange name, Rodriguezii. Liana, came from Rachel. Pushing out quite a few new roots in places, but this one loves its aerial roots. It pushes them out and they extend and extend and end up really long and wispy and take over the back of the mount. But this one does, on its latest winter growth, which is small, it has decided to push a spike out. So we'll have some blooms on that down the line. That's that one. Next one along is one of the many dendrobiums you will see. This is Dendrobium moniliform, and it's a variegated form, so it's got those lovely creamy edges to the leaves. This recently pushed up that growth at the back, and it's now starting a new one and has got a reasonable root system. It's recently been in flower on two of the older canes. There's a pair of blooms on one cane followed by another pair. This has bloomed, it blooms on and off. I don't think it's really got a blooming season. It blooms when the canes are mature and ready. And it is semi-deciduous. Eventually canes will lose their leaves, but they don't do it annually. It holds its leaves for several years before they start to drop. This is Dendrobium Jenkins CI that had rather a nice little set of blooms this spring for the first time ever. Well, first time it's had a mass blooming anyway. This is just spreading. It's spreading out in all directions. It's growing well, and they're starting to mature already, but the early new growths this year are already nearly full size. That's about the only one you can tell is a new growth. You can see the different colour of the leaf and the more shiny, less shriveled look of the growth. And the one next to it's this year's growth as well. And several of these down here, yeah, doing well. I've had this one quite a long time, but this was the first year it bloomed well, and I do believe, yeah, there's quite a bit of new root growth going on in amongst it. It just forms a mound on the mount, but it grows well, and now I've got the thing to bloom, so hopefully it'll do that every spring now. Another Arangus. This is Fastuosa. This had two spikes on it not too long ago. You can see the stumps where they were. And being an Arangus, again, it forms new plants near the base. And this currently has its main plant that bloomed, and it's starting a new one off to the side. Both of which are in active growth at the moment. And this plant has never had what I would call a good root system. The roots are tiny. and it lives on this tiny little mount. I've had this quite a few years, and it just seems to like being how it is. You can see a couple of new root tips in places, a little nice bright orangey colour rather than green. But for a miniature plant, the blooms are quite good, quite fragrant, quite large, and don't last bad. I won't say they last ages, but they don't last bad. This is Dendrobium Jenkins CI, a relatively new acquisition. Bought during last year, bloomed well not that long ago, and I wasn't expecting it to, so that was a bonus. And now it's showing its typical growth. These tend to grow flat against whatever they're growing on, mossy mound, low down branch, whatever. But they tend to creep over the ground. So along the canes they produce plantlets, which you can call kikis if you like. But that is its style of growth. And you can see it doing it now. It's pushing out new growths along the older canes. And if those canes were lying flat, those would root and form basically the basis of new plants. But it also grows from the base. So there's quite a few new growths coming out the top there from the base of the plant. So this is growing all over the place at the moment, and quite a few new roots pushing out in quite a few places. So yeah, that's growing well. Nice plant for a new acquisition. The one next to it is an Aussie one. This is Dendrobium Fleckeri. This is the one that was recently turned round on its mount because that new growth was disappearing up into the back of the mount. My fault. Planted it back to front. But now that new growth can push on, there will be new roots to go with that. And that one should get going a bit. Has bloomed for me, and it only had a single bloom, whereas I've seen pictures where this can get multiple blooms on the tops of the canes. So we'll see what happens with that latest growth. In theory, that is the other latest growth, the tall one with 3 leaves. There's no reason why that shouldn't bloom, but it's one of those dendrobiums that blooms from the top, and every cane produces a sheath. And they're a tease because they often just sit there like that for months on end, and then all of a sudden they start to grow and bloom. So Dendrobium Fleckeri, an Aussie type. And the last one along here is, I don't know. This is one of the big box full. Dendrobium Pterygonum, variety giganteum. Well, we'll wait and see. Certainly the plant isn't a giant, but maybe that reflects the bloom size. Don't really know. So it's a new acquisition. There's bits of green showing around the base. Not sure whether they're roots or new growths, but having been uprooted from the country it lived in from the nursery and taken to the person who then had it for a while and then packed it up and sent it to the UK in the middle of the winter when it was freezing cold, and it then got taken out and mounted, it's been disturbed just a little bit. So it's going to take a while to re-establish itself. But the growth that I've got is healthy. So we'll see how that one pushes on this year. It should settle down now. It's not going to get uprooted again. It's got a, constant environment now. And it should just get going now. There are some new roots pushing out down the back there. So we'll see how that one progresses. This one is Tulum Peach, and like most of my Tulumnias, they got badly infested with scale last year, and some of them didn't recover. Basically, they chewed off the base of the plants and then where the new roots were growing. This year some of them are clear. This one is. There's no sign of any scale. I've just thoroughly inspected it, but those two down there did have a few, so they've just been treated. But this one's got 1, 2, 3. I think that's 3, possibly 4 new growths pushing out on this one, and a massive increase in its root system through the winter in the main. So this should really push on this year, and I'm expecting at least one of those fans to bloom later in the year, and looking forward to it. One of my favourite Tulumnias, and that is not a bad plant now, so it's coming on nicely. As opposed to this Tulumnia, which is not coming along nicely. This has been so close to going out under the hedge, but its saving grace was it started a little new growth, and and it is pushing on very slowly, but the plant has no new roots on it. The only roots it's got are older ones, which are just about hydrating it, but not very well. It's quite desiccated, but it's now got another new growth pushing up the back. So this may make it. Those two growths are its only hope, and this is Jarrac Flyer Red Butterfly, or it may be again one day. It's difficult to say what I'd like to call it at the moment, but that's not doing well. That's one that was hit bad and has never really recovered. So we'll see how that one goes. Now this little Tolumnia has no label on it, no tag. When I remounted them all and treated them excessively for the scale last year, and then tried to keep the tags with the plants, I know in my collection I had two that were just hybrids and had no name, and I'm hoping this is just one of those. But if and when it blooms again, which it's growing quite nicely now, this is quite a small one. This is a more miniature type Tolumnia, not one of the larger type, so it's not doing bad, and it's got several new growths coming, and it's pushed out a good root system through the winter, so this one's coming on. I don't believe it's full size yet. It may or may not bloom on these latest fans, and if and when it does, everything that's ever bloomed for me has a picture. So if I can identify a picture against this plant, it may be one of the named ones, but it may just be hybrid. But it's growing now, at least it's coming back to life. Now this Tolumnia is quite interesting as an effect. This one has been in bloom through virtually all of the winter. This is Golden Sunrays Sunrise, and it was in bloom for 4 or 5 months on 2 successive spikes that then continuously branched. So it's only recently gone out of bloom, and when my Tolumnias are in bloom, I move them down here where I can see them. So they're in a lower light level, which is where this one was. And now it's moved back up into the higher light level. It's responded by turning a purpley tinge. Now, I'm not panicking with this. These do need very good light, otherwise they won't bloom. So you've got dark green leaves on these, they need more light. When they get to the purple stage, they're bordering on too much. But this is acclimatizing, it's only recently gone back up in the light, yeah? And there's plenty of green on the underside of the plant. As far as the plant's concerned though, it's got a little new growth out to the side there and another one at the base there. So it is pushing some new fans out now. It hasn't got the best of root systems. Nearly all of the roots it's got, apart from a few white ones just starting, are older style roots. And they always look a bit dead on Tolumnias. They're not. They still hydrate. That's how they go. They start off white and shiny with green tips and spread out, and then after a year or so they turn a brownish colour and lose their growing tips. That doesn't mean to say they don't work anymore. They still work. Don't cut them off. They work. They hydrate the plant. If you look at them growing in the wild, that's what most of their roots look like, and they're not all dead, are they? So anyway, this one's just coming back into vegetative growth after a very long blooming period. So just getting going again, that one. Now this one is Tolumnia Sunset Pink, which currently has quite a nice spike pushing on to come soon. As far as the plant's concerned, this was another one. If you can see what happens to the older parts of the plant. That's what scale did. If you look at all those markings on those leaves, all those pale patches are where the scale got down in those crevices, and they get right down in the base of the leaves where you really can't see them. And although that plant looks like it's just been watered, that has just been absolutely drowned in Bravado. Roots and all. Roots, moss, plant, down through the leaves, the whole plant's just been soaked because I spotted a scale. And it might have even been a dead scale, but if it wasn't, it should be now. As far as the plant's going, its latest growth, it's 2 plants effectively. This one, it broke in 2 when I mounted it. The section holding it together wasn't strong, but the lower plant, with the weak growth, has now put on that fan that's not even fully mature yet, but it's blooming. And this plant over here has effectively got 2 new fans pushing out, So that's coming on behind. But again, you can see the damage on the rear part of that plant that the scale did. Telltale signs, pale patches near the base of the leaves that don't look right, and if you separate those leaves away, just pull them outwards slightly and look down in the crevices. If you see scale in there, get at them, because they really will do serious damage to these plants. They do not like it at all. Anyway, this one's coming on now and will be blooming soon. Now this one is Tolum Spicus giganteus. Yes, I am mucking about. This is my only species, Tolum Neos. It's Europhylla. And the spikes are enormously long. 2 spikes currently. This one's right out here, so that's already 14 inches long. And the next one's following on behind. And this one, although this one had scale, it survived it very well. It actually did not go down like some of the others, so this one looks quite a good plant despite the fact it was absolutely infested. Perhaps I just got it in time, but I just saw a couple of little white dots on this one, so this one's just been drowned in bravado as well. I don't take any chances with these. I had 15 once, I've got 8 now. It tells a story. It's that bad. But anyway, this one's growing well. It's got some aerial roots, roots pushed right down through the moss, even going around the back of the mount. So this has got an excellent root system now, well capable of supporting the plant. And it's difficult to tell the new fans from the old fans on this because they've reached their blooming size. So as for tiny little new fans starting, they're not there at the moment. Everything on this plant is virtually mature. So that is a good looking plant. You know, as Tolum Neos go, that's not a bad looking plant. That's more like what they ought to look like. Multiple fans, good strong leaves, yeah, and a good strong root system. Nice one. Right, the next set it's just going to be a sequence of dendrobiums. Most of my dendrobiums are mounted, or a lot of them are, and I'm watering mounts today, so that's just the order they're going to come down in. Start with Mr. Hairy. Just opening a couple of unexpected blooms. But this plant is out of season. But last time I looked at this, I was desperately looking for new growths because they're late. Because the plant's out of season. I got this at Malvern last year, and it didn't do autumn in the autumn, in other words drop its leaves off. It's starting to do it now. It's that far out from where it should be, but nonetheless all I was after on this plant is new growths as early in the season as possible, which will then be next year's blooms along with some of these canes. And I've just spotted some. There's one there on the end, so there's one new growth there. Oh, there's another one right at the very top, at the base of that tiny little bulb. There's a new growth there, and there's another one part way down the side of that plant. So it is now starting some new growths. Now those have got to grow on well this year and get to the size of those large canes, so it's got some work to do. Or rather, I've got some work to do. Feed and water well. And this is a strange one, Dendrobium Cinelli. This does not like high light in the growing season. It doesn't do well. It needs some reasonable medium light, I would say. Not even high light. It doesn't need it. It comes from quite heavy deciduous forest, so in its growing season it's quite well shaded. And the canes will push on bigger and better without that bright light. It really puts on the vegetative growth, and then, you know, come the autumn time, in its deciduous environment, deciduous forest, the leaves would drop and suddenly it gets bright light, and that's what it needs in the winter. But we do have some new growths just starting and a bloom just opening. I didn't expect them this year, I must admit. Anyway, this is several plants all mounted together. I bought it as one big plant and it turned out not to be, but nonetheless new growths. And a lot of these canes will probably have dropped most of their leaves by the time we get to the winter, and the leaves will be on the new growths. Possibly some of the older canes might keep their leaves, but certainly the more mature ones are going to drop those over the next few months. And then look like the hairy tarantula, like those canes. That's what it looks like when it's got no leaves on. Big hairy tarantula. I'd keep this if it didn't bloom. I love this plant. Smashing. Right, this next one is one of the big box, endearingly known as the big box orchids, which was a large box of orchids from a viewer who was moving countries and couldn't take her plants and kindly donated the lot to me. Cheers for that. Just when I'm trying to cut down. Nonetheless, there's some good ones in amongst them. They're not going anywhere. This one is Dendrobium Crevice. And as a plant, it's not doing well. This has 0 root growth and 0 growth from the base. But what it is doing is turning itself into a kiki machine. So there's life in the plant. It's growing kikis all over the place. Yeah? So it's not dead. It's got a very strange cross section on the cane. Wafer thin and wide. That's how they are. That's how they grow. But nonetheless, all it's doing as far as progress is concerned at the moment is growing kikis. And I'm basically, once these kikis get a reasonable root system, they've got open leaves already in places. A kiki needs leaves that are open and a reasonable root system. Otherwise, it'll just be set back if you separate it. So I'm going to wait till these roots get better. Then I will separate the kikis and mount them, so that I end up with a lot of new canes starting. So that's what will happen to that one. At the moment, it's just doing kikis. There is absolutely no sign of life at the base of that plant. But it wasn't in a good state when I got it. But, it's growing kikis, so it's growing something. That's better than growing nothing at all. So we'll see how that one gets on. This is Dendrobium Millennium. And effectively, yes, it is upside down. Until recently, this was in a pot and it fell over and knocked 2 other plants over for the last time, and really got my goat. I thought, right, that's your lot, mate. You're going upside down. So at the moment, the leaves don't look right because it's only recently been hung upside down. But I think looking at the way it grows, it will acclimatise to that growth. It's sulking a little bit at the moment, but there's no new roots growing at the base, but that's got a very extensive root system in under that moss, so I'm not worried about it surviving its transition. But no new growth at the moment, and it hasn't had new growth for quite a long time. These are, in effect, the new growths. These were young growths when I got it, and they pushed on dramatically. They haven't finished yet. I don't think they've got their terminal leaves yet. No, they're still growing. They still haven't finished. And they've been growing since I got it, and they still are. Soon, easy to tell, if you've still got leaves opening with a new leaf inside, it hasn't finished growing yet. The terminal leaf is, I was going to say more like that one, but that's got a new leaf coming. So this is still growing. So these canes are going to get even bigger and heavier. So it would have just kept falling over. So it's now mounted. It can live like that for a while. And eventually, new canes will come and the leaves on those canes will be up the right way. These will still survive this way up, and these are going to be the canes where the blooms come from. And then at some point or another, the leaves will eventually fall. So it's only got to live like that for a while. But no growth at the base yet, and certainly no sign of buds. So we'll see how that one gets on as the year progresses. This is another Dendrobium from Ronja out of the big box, and this looked in a very sorry state when I got it. Some serious distortion on some of the leaves, which I thought may have been cold damage, but they could have that damage or the distortion could have already been there when I got it. But it looked a little lifeless. It looked like it was sorry for itself and suffering, but since it got mounted at the base, it's now going mad. It's now producing an extensive new root system from near the base and at the base. And there are signs of new canes growing now. So this one's made it. Luckily, although the roots were old and desiccated, they were still capable of hydrating the plant, because it did have an extensive root system, but they were old, dry roots. But they've kept it going long enough to restart the root system. And I haven't got a name for this one at the moment, but I have. It just hasn't got a tag on it at the moment, but I'll do that as a pop-up. But yeah, this one's going to make it nicely now. This one's going to recover well. With the root system pushing out like that, it can't really fail anymore. And there are signs of new growths near other parts of the base of the plant, which you may say are kikis. But, you know, it's a new acquisition. I don't know its growth style yet. But there is some signs of new growth at the base. So we'll see how that one progresses. Got a feeling a lot of these leaves are going to drop, either during the year or certainly when we get to the autumn. So we'll see what new growth we get. Well, this will have to be the last one for today because I've just had to turn the fans off. And once I get to that stage, if they turn on the thermostat, they need to be on, not switched off so as I can film. So this will be the end of part 1. This is Dendrobium Hibiki. And this has been filmed a bit lately because we've been playing a game with the buds and the new growths and stuff. And it's another upside down plant. This thing would not stand up in its pot. And that's the rules with me, certainly for dendrobiums. If you won't stand up and be stable in an upright position, then blow you can go upside down. And I don't think I've ever seen a Hibiki mounted. They've always been in pots. So, well, this one's mounted and that's how it's staying. This is a mass of buds at the moment. It's got buds coming out all over the place, but it has got new growth too. And it is starting a total new root system as it goes along as well. So a little new growth there. And there's one actually tucked right up in there. I hope it can find its way out because it's sort of down in there. So there are a couple of new growths showing at the moment. Buds to come and open soon, and re-establishing a good root system. The root system wasn't bad when I mounted it, but it's certainly improving over time now. Even the old roots have branched out. So this one's coming on nicely now. Leaves are upside down, tough. New growths, they will acclimatise and get themselves sorted. But these canes are the ones that are going to be the next ones to bloom. These bloom on the older deciduous canes, and the ones I've seen growing are often looking like this. They seem to be blooming on short stubby canes, so I don't quite know what's going to happen with these big long canes. You don't very often see them in a condition like this with very, very large canes on them. So it'll be interesting to see if and when these long canes actually produce buds, which is probably not going to be till next spring now. So that seems to be its time of year. So all these little stubby older canes are doing buds at the moment, and we'll have to wait and see what happens to these long ones. It'll be interesting, but that's the state of play with that one. And that'll do for part 1, and I'll put some more together as I go along.